On this, we are joined by CQ Weekly Senior Elections Analyst Bob Benenson. Bob, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
So we're seeing more than what we expected in New York. We knew that there were live races, if you will, in New York, but we didn't know there were this many. We see Bill Clinton here stumping for Dan Maffei, who at one point was considered fairly close, but now perhaps not. And then with Maurice Hinchey, who is a vet. I mean, Maffei is a freshman, but Hinchey is a vet. So this is apparently going on all over the country.
Well, it sure is. And, you know, New York was vulnerable to have a lot of competitive races because the Democrats have just made huge gains over the last couple election cycles. Right now, the Democrats hold 26 out of the 29 seats in New York, which is kind of unbelievable. And so a lot of those districts are not necessarily drawn to be strongly Democratic. And in a year like this one, where the Republicans are kind of on a comeback, it's not surprising that a lot of the Democratic incumbents are really facing very serious fights where they won easily the last couple of elections.
Well, what's weird, though, is at the state level races, you know, we're seeing a lot of upset over Carl Palladino, and we're also seeing, who's very controversial and, of course, a national figure, but we're also seeing some upset in the state Senate races, very close, you know, a 2-seat margin in our state Senate. But at the congressional level, I mean, you've got maybe as many as a dozen seats in play now. I mean, that in a blue state like New York is a lot of seats. But what is really, I mean, at issue here is going to be, it's going to be GOTV. I mean, this is something we've kept saying all over the place, but it really is true. It's who can pull the votes on Election Day.
Right. It sure is. You know, what the Republicans are doing, and you mentioned Maurice Hinchey's race in New York's 22nd district, which is kind of one of those sprawling upstate districts that goes all the way from Ithaca to Poughkeepsie.
For miles.
Miles and miles.
Yes.
And yeah, Hinchey has been very safe, and he's facing George Phillips, the same candidate, who he beat by almost a 2-to-1 margin last time. So it just shows you how much the ground has changed. But, you know, it raises a question. How seriously endangered are veteran incumbents like Hinchey, or are there places where the Republicans are just, you know, trying to engage some voters' interest, make the races closer, get the Democrats running around like Bill Clinton coming to upstate New York to campaign for Hinchey, and waste some of their time and their capital on races that aren't necessarily going to end up that close? And we don't know. There are always a few races in these kind of political wave years where somebody who never thought was going to end up losing ends up doing so. I mean, the Republicans had that in 2006 and 2008. The Democrats had a lot of that back in 1994, which was the last big Republican upswing in congressional races.
It's like,
so,
it's like a head fake. Is that what you're saying? It's like trying to bait the Republicans? Interesting. Or bait the Democrats, rather.
Well, you know what happened in 2006 when the Democrats gained 30 seats and took over the U.S. House. The Republicans actually defended some of their most vulnerable members fairly successfully. They put a lot of money in there, a lot of effort. They were seasoned candidates, and they wound up surviving. The Democrats found some candidates. You know, so you could say that they were the George Phillipses of 2006 and 2008, who just came out of nowhere. They put a little bit of money behind them in the end, and they wound up pulling some big upsets. And majorities are made not only out of winning the expectable races, the obviously competitive ones, but pulling off some upsets. And you never know. You know, one thing the Republicans have to be concerned of this year is this is not only going to wind up being an anti-democratic year, but ultimately people could go to the polls and say, we don't like any of the incumbents. And all of a sudden, Republicans who thought they were, you know, in clover, you know, are going to wind up losing, could wind up losing too. So the Republicans need to win as many Democratic seats and put as many Democratic seats into play as they can if they want to, you know, gain the 39 seats they need to win to gain a majority.
Well, one thing that we're seeing that we hadn't seen in the past is resources, right? I mean, not only is it just that the Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee is spending and the Republican counterparts, but now because of the U.S. Supreme Court decision, you also have this ability of corporate spending to be, and it's going through the roof, and you can't track it. So it's these independent expenditures are coming in, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, for example, or whoever else might be doing it, and we're seeing it all over in these races.
Right. If money alone was going to make the difference, the Democrats would be in very serious danger of getting swamped. And there are some Republican strategists who are talking huge numbers, 80-seat gain, 100-seat gain. And if this outside money really has that much clout, you could see a very extraordinary swing year this year. But on the other hand, the Democrats do have that ground game advantage that they built in 2006 and 2008. They built a big get out the vote operation. They harvested a lot of names and phone numbers and email addresses and home addresses. And they're going to be contacting millions of people to try and energize them and get them out to the polls over the next few weeks. The other thing is, we don't know how much effect campaign advertising has and the degree to which it's effective as it was in previous election years, because people have other alternatives. They don't necessarily sit there and watch campaign commercials, the way they did. The commercials come on, and you're channel surfing, and you're flipping between shows, or you're playing,
God
with
forbid.
Facebook or whatever.
Don't say such a thing.
Yeah.
No channel surfing here. There is, speaking of ads, though, there is an ad that came out today that's really quite interesting. It's in New York 23, which of course was a GOP-held seat for years, for like a century,
right,
until Obama got in there and plucked out John McHugh, to make him the Army Secretary. And then we saw the Democrats in a national race that you had a moderate, Didi Scazafava, get pushed out by the more conservative Doug Hoffman. Now it's back to two men. It's a guy named Matt Doheny and Bill Owens. Bill Owens has this ad out that says that he votes 63% of the time with the Republican House Leader John Boehner. He's a Democrat. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, but this is a fairly typical strategy for Democrats who find themselves in a difficult situation, or let's say either party. But when the incumbent finds himself in a difficult political situation, in a district that generally leans the other way, you'll see them do this. They'll say, I am not a party line voter. I'm not a rubber stamp. So Democrats in several of these districts this year are saying, I'm not a knee-jerk vote for Nancy Pelosi. I am bipartisan. I'll reach across the aisle. I'll vote with Republicans. And they pretty much have to do this. And the interesting thing is that they have license from their party to do this kind of thing. In 2006 and 2008, the Republican leadership said, go ahead, run against President Bush if you have to, if that's what you need to save your seat and help boost the Republicans' overall numbers. And the Democrats are saying the same thing. No, well, overall, we are touting President Obama's agenda, and we think we've done a good job over the last couple of years since the president was elected. But if you have to send a different message to your constituency because it's more Republican leaning or more conservative leaning, then go ahead and do that. And that's what Bill Owens is doing up there. Whatever
it takes to win, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. Control of the House is a big deal. But those numbers about voting percentages of the time are actually quite squishy, because you've got Doheny, the Republican, accusing Owens of voting with Pelosi 93% of the time. And you guys do a rating. And actually, you've got Owens joining the Democrats on party line votes 84% of the time, when the median is 97%. So that makes him actually fairly moderate.
Yeah, as Mark Twain once said, and I think this pertains to politics, that there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. and you can play with the numbers any way that really suits the message that you're trying to get across. Even if you take our numbers as gospel, as we do, the vote the party unity score that Bill Owens is touting as showing that he's independent, he is voting a number of times against most members of his own party and with most members of the Republican Party on some issues. And he says, see, I am not a rubber stamp. I'm not a knee-jerk Pelosi advocate. The Republicans will come back and they'll say, yeah, but you're still voting with Nancy Pelosi 90% of the time.
Well, they're fighting now. They're fighting now about the numbers. We're actually going to be talking more about this later in the week. In the meantime, though, unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to thank you very much for joining us, Bob Benenson. It's great to see you.
My pleasure.